The gunshot echoed across the Montana plains as Sarah Novak clutched her father's pocket watch, blood spattering the weathered farmhouse porch. It was 1876, and at 22, she had just become the sole owner of the modest cattle ranch her father had built, with calloused hands and stubborn dreams. The sheriff's men had buried Pa 3 days ago, but the loneliness still cut sharper than the autumn wind. The first snow fell early that November, dusting the ranch in white. Sarah managed alone, rising before dawn to milk the cows, mend fences, and keep the accounts her father had taught her to balance. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles east, and town was a half-day's ride southwest. She'd grown accustomed to the silence, to speaking only to the livestock and occasionally to her father's grave behind the apple orchard. That changed on a bitter Thursday evening when Sarah heard a noise from the barn while closing up the chicken coop. She froze, lantern raised, listening to the unmistakable sounds of movement inside. Wolves didn't open barn doors, neither did coyotes. Her father's rifle hung above the fireplace. Sarah considered retrieving it, but something made her hesitate. Instead, she clutched her kitchen knife in her apron pocket and approached the barn cautiously, pushing the heavy door open with her shoulder. "Who's there?" she called, voice steadier than her heartbeat. Silence answered, but Sarah knew better. Her lantern illuminated fresh drops of something dark on the straw-covered floor. Blood. She followed the trail to the back stall, where the old mare Penny whickered softly. Huddled in the corner, pressed against the wooden slats, was a man. His hat was pulled low, but she could see he was clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. A revolver lay within reach on the straw. "Don't come closer," he warned, voice ragged. He didn't reach for the gun. Sarah should have run for help, should have been terrified. Instead, she studied him tall, lean, with several days' worth of stubble darkening his jaw. His clothes were trail-worn, covered in dust, and his boots had seen better days. "You're bleeding on my clean straw," she said finally. A surprised laugh escaped him before he winced in pain. "My apologies, madam." Sarah set the lantern on a hook and crossed her arms. "Are you going to shoot me if I help you?" "No, madam." His eyes, startlingly blue beneath the shadow of his hat, held hers. "I'll be gone by morning." She shouldn't trust him. But something in his gaze, something haunted yet honest, made her decision. "Stay put. I'll be back." In the kitchen, Sarah gathered bandages, whiskey, needle, and thread. She added a loaf of fresh bread, some cheese, and a canteen of water to her basket before returning to the barn. The stranger hadn't moved, though his breathing seemed more labored. "Take your shirt off," she instructed, rolling up her sleeves. When he hesitated, she added, "I've doctored worse on cattle. Whatever you're running from won't matter if you bleed to death in my barn." His fingers fumbled with the buttons, revealing a nasty gash along his ribs, likely from a knife. As Sarah cleaned the wound, she felt his eyes on her face. "You're not going to ask who I am?" he questioned. Sarah threaded her needle. "Would you tell me the truth?" Another surprised, almost smile. "Probably not." "Then there's no point in asking." She poured whiskey over the wound, and he hissed through clenched teeth. "This will hurt," she warned, beginning to stitch. His body tensed, but he didn't make a sound as she worked. When she finished, Sarah handed him the bread and cheese. "Eat. There's a blanket in the tack room. Like you said, be gone by morning." She was nearly to the door when his voice stopped her. "Why help me?" Sarah paused, lantern casting long shadows. "My father always said every soul deserves a moment of grace." She didn't mention that she had buried Pa just days ago, or that the house echoed with emptiness. "Good night, stranger." She locked the farmhouse door that night, her father's rifle propped beside her bed. But sleep came easier than she expected. Morning broke clear and cold. Sarah approached the barn cautiously, half expecting to find it empty. Instead, she found the stranger awake, looking feverish but alert. The blanket was neatly folded, the straw swept clean. "You're still here," she observed. "Seems my body had other ideas about traveling," he admitted. "I'll go today." Sarah assessed him critically. "You'll tear those stitches and die in a ditch." She set down a fresh bundle, a clean shirt that had belonged to her father, more bread, and hot coffee. "You can stay until you're well enough. The fever needs to break." Why would you risk harboring a man you know nothing about? Sarah poured the coffee into a tin cup. I know you could have shot me last night, but didn't. I know you're injured, but still tried to clean up. She paused. And I know my father would have done the same. The stranger accepted the cup with unsteady hands. My name is Samuel, Sam Zander. I didn't ask. I know, but I'm offering. Sarah nodded slowly. Sarah Novak. Over the next 3 days, Sam's fever rose and broke. Sarah tended him between her chores, bringing food, changing bandages, and occasionally reading aloud from one of her father's books when the silence grew too heavy. She didn't ask questions, and he volunteered little beyond his name. On the 4th morning, Sarah found him standing in the barn doorway, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered fields gold. You should be resting, she chided, but without heat. Been resting long enough? He turned to face her, his color better, eyes clearer. I need to earn my keep, Miss Novak. Sarah, she corrected, and you're in no condition. There are chores I can manage, he insisted. I noticed your corral fence is leaning, and that water pump by the house needs work. Sarah hesitated. Winter was settling in, and there was too much for one person to manage. The fence can wait until your side heals, but if you're determined, there's wood that needs chopping. Sam nodded, something like relief crossing his face. He followed her to the woodpile, where Sarah showed him the axe and the stack of logs needing attention. She left him to it, though she watched from the kitchen window as he worked slowly, favoring his injured side. By noon, he had managed a respectable pile of split firewood before Sarah called him in for lunch. They ate in awkward silence stew and biscuits at her father's old table. How long have you been alone here? Sam asked finally. Sarah stiffened. Who says I'm alone? One corner of his mouth lifted. No husband's boots by the door, no men's clothes on the line, and a woman with family wouldn't risk taking in a stranger. My father died 3 weeks ago, Sarah said after a pause. Bullet meant for someone else hit him instead, outside the general store in town. Sam's expression darkened. I'm sorry. It was quick, the doctor said. Sarah stared into her bowl. Pa built this place from nothing. I aim to keep it running. That's a hard road for a woman alone. I'm stronger than I look. I don't doubt that for a second, Miss Sarah. That afternoon, despite her protests, Sam fixed the kitchen door that had been sticking since the first frost. His movements were careful, measured, but his hands were skilled. Sarah watched him work, noting the quiet efficiency in his movements. You've done this before, she observed. My pa was a carpenter before. He trailed off. I picked up a few things. Sarah didn't press. Everyone had parts of their past they'd rather not discuss. Instead, she asked, Would you like to wash up before supper? I can heat water. Something like longing crossed Sam's face. That would be very kind. While he bathed in the kitchen, Sarah took fresh clothes to the edge of the screen she'd set up for privacy, another set of her father's, worn but clean. When Sam emerged, clean-shaven with damp hair, she was struck by how different he looked. Younger, perhaps 30 at most, with a strong jaw and those clear blue eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. Much better, she said, trying to sound casual. You almost look respectable now. Almost, he agreed with a hint of humor. Thank you. They fell into an uneasy routine over the following week. Sam slept in the barn, but took meals with Sarah in the house. During daylight hours, he tackled repairs around the property, while she tended to the livestock and other chores. They worked separately, but in harmony, like dancers carefully maintaining distance while following the same rhythm. Each night after supper, they sat by the fire, Sam carving wood with a pocket knife while Sarah mended or knitted. Sometimes they talked careful, neutral topics like the weather or ranch matters. Sometimes they shared comfortable silence. Sarah found herself sleeping better, knowing someone else was nearby, even if that someone remained largely a mystery. On the 10th day, while Sam was repairing a chicken coop and Sarah was gathering eggs, the sound of approaching horses made them both freeze. Sarah peered through the window to see 3 men riding up the long drive to the farmhouse. Get inside, Sam ordered quietly, his hand instinctively moving toward his hip where his gun would have been. Who are they? Sarah whispered. Trouble, was all he said, guiding her toward the farmhouse. Stay inside, bolt the door. But, please, Sarah. Something in his eyes made her nod. She hurried to the house, watching through the curtains as Sam walked calmly to meet the riders, hands visible at his sides. The lead rider, a brawny man with a handlebar mustache, dismounted first. "Well, well," his voice carried across the yard. "Samuel Zander, fancy finding you playing farmhand." "Haggerty," Sam acknowledged. "What brings you to these parts?" $5,000 brings me to these parts." Haggerty spat tobacco juice onto the snow. "That's the bounty on your head now." Sarah's heart hammered. Bounty. Sam was wanted. The pieces began falling into place, his reluctance to give his name, the injury, the gun. "The lady of the house knows she's harboring a killer?" Haggerty asked, loud enough for Sarah to hear. "I never killed anyone who didn't try to kill me first," Sam replied evenly. "Tell that to Judge Parker. He's real eager to hang you after what happened in Fort Smith." Sarah's fingers tightened on the curtain. A killer? She couldn't reconcile the man who had carefully repaired her home, who sat quietly by her fire each evening, with a murderer worth thousands in bounty money. Haggerty signaled to his companions. "We're taking you in, Zander. Dead or alive doesn't much matter to me." Before Sam could respond, Sarah grabbed her father's rifle and stepped onto the porch. "This is private property, gentlemen," she called, the rifle steady in her hands. "I'll thank you to state your business properly or move along." Haggerty turned toward her, surprise evident before his expression hardened. "Madam, this doesn't concern you. This man is wanted by the law." "That may be," Sarah replied, "but he's under my protection at present. Do you have papers proving your authority to take him?" The bounty hunters exchanged glances. "Didn't think so," Sarah continued. "On my land, I'm the only authority that matters. Now kindly move along before I decide you're trespassing." "You're making a mistake, lady," Haggerty warned. "This man's dangerous. The only danger I see is 3 armed men threatening my ranch hand." Sarah didn't lower the rifle. "Leave now." For a tense moment, Haggerty seemed ready to challenge her. Then he spat again and remounted his horse. "We'll be watching the roads," he told Sam, "and when you leave this place, which you will, we'll be waiting." As the riders departed, Sarah's arms began to tremble, the rifle suddenly heavy. Sam approached slowly, taking the weapon from her hands. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Probably not," she agreed, her voice unsteady. "Are you really worth $5,000? Sam's expression was grim. "To some." "Are you a killer?" He met her gaze directly. "I've killed. In self-defense, in war, never in cold blood." Sarah studied his face, looking for deceit. "What happened in Fort Smith?" Sam sighed, setting the rifle aside. "I was a deputy marshal. There was a shootout with smugglers bringing illegal whiskey to the reservations. The judge's son was involved. He pulled on me. I fired back. He died. But if it was self-defense, his father is the hanging judge. He believes I murdered his boy." Sam's expression darkened. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses changed their stories. So I ran. Sarah absorbed this, weighing his words against what she had seen of his character. "Why tell me now?" "Because you have a right to know what you've gotten yourself into." His voice lowered. "And because I've never met anyone like you, Sarah Novak." The air between them changed, charged with something new and fragile. Sarah took a step back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "They'll come back," she said. "Yes, which means I should go. Or you could stay." The words surprised her as much as him. "Winter's setting in. They'll assume you've moved on after a while." Sam shook his head. "I can't put you in danger." "I put myself in danger when I decided to help you," Sarah pointed out. "Besides, I need the help around here. We can say you're my cousin come to help with the ranch." "Your cousin?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "With a different last name?" "My mother's side," Sarah improvised. "We can figure out the details." Sam studied her for a long moment. "Why would you do this?" Sarah wasn't entirely sure herself. "Because I believe your story. Because I need help. Because—" She stopped, unable to articulate the rest. "Because the house doesn't feel empty when you're in it. Because I sleep better knowing you're nearby." "It's a risk," he warned. "Life is a risk, Mr. Zander." Sarah squared her shoulders. "Now, are you staying or going?" His smile was slow but genuine. Staying, for now. As December deepened, the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Sam moved from the barn to the small room off the kitchen that had once been used for storage. Sarah maintained propriety by leaving the connecting door open at all times, though the arrangement would have scandalized the ladies in town had they known. They established a cover story. Sam was her cousin from her mother's side, helping with the ranch through the winter. They practiced it together, ironing out details about a shared fictional childhood that would withstand casual questioning. The work was easier with two. Sam took over the heavy chores, repairing what had fallen into disrepair since her father's passing. Sarah focused on the household and livestock, though she never let Sam forget it was her ranch, her decisions that mattered. One evening, as snow fell heavily outside, they sat by the fire after supper. Sam was whittling again, a hobby that had produced several small animal figures that now lined Sarah's mantel. "You have skill with that knife," she commented. "My grandfather taught me." Sam turned the piece of pine in his hands, revealing the emerging shape of a horse. "He said idle hands invited the devil's work. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He was." Sam's expression softened with memory. "Raised me after my parents died in a fire when I was 10. It was the most personal information he had volunteered since arriving. Sarah treasured it like a gift. "My mother died of fever when I was 12, she offered in return. "It was just Pa and me after that." Sam nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a harsh country for children without mothers." "For anyone without family," Sarah agreed. She watched his hands work the wood for a moment. "What would you be doing now, if things had gone differently?" Sam considered this. "I had a small piece of land near Fort Smith. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd planned to build a proper house come spring." "You wanted to be a rancher?" "A farmer, maybe. Grow things instead of chasing outlaws." He smiled faintly. "Not so different from what I'm doing now, I suppose." Sarah tried to imagine him settled on his own land, planting crops, building a home. It came easier than picturing him as a lawman tracking criminals. "What about you?" Sam asked. "Did you always plan to run this place?" "I never thought about it much," Sarah admitted. "Pa assumed I'd marry someday, but until then, this was home, after he died." She looked around the simple but comfortable room. "This became my purpose." "It's a fine ranch," Sam said sincerely. "Your father built something worth keeping." "I think so too." They fell silent, comfortable in each other's company. Outside, the snow continued to fall, insulating them from the world beyond. Christmas approached with little fanfare. Neither mentioned the holiday until one afternoon, when Sam disappeared into the woods at the edge of the property and returned hours later with a small pine tree. "What's this?" Sarah asked as he propped it in the corner of the sitting room. "Christmas is in 3 days," Sam explained, looking suddenly uncertain. "I thought maybe you'd want, but if it's too much of a reminder—" "No," Sarah interrupted, touching the fragrant branches. "It's perfect. Pa and I always had a tree." Together they decorated it with strings of dried berries, paper stars Sarah cut from old letters, and candles in small holders. The simple act of preparing for the holiday eased something in Sarah's heart that had been clenched tight since her father's death. On Christmas Eve, after a supper of roast chicken and potatoes, Sam presented Sarah with a small wooden box. "I made this for you," he said, almost shy. "Merry Christmas, Sarah." The box was exquisitely crafted from cherry wood, its lid inlaid with a pattern of stars. Inside, the wood was lined with soft flannel. "For your father's watch," Sam explained when Sarah looked puzzled. "I've seen you take it out sometimes. Thought it deserved a proper case." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. The pocket watch was indeed her most treasured possession, currently wrapped in a handkerchief in her dresser drawer. That Sam had noticed, had crafted something so perfect for it. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you." She went to her room and returned with a package wrapped in brown paper and string. "This isn't nearly as special, but Merry Christmas, Sam." Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool. Sam ran his fingers over the careful stitches, his expression soft with wonder. "You made this for me?" Sarah nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "The color matches your eyes," she said, then blushed at her own boldness. Sam wrapped the scarf around his neck, the soft wool stark against his tanned skin. "No one's made me anything in Well, a very long time. Well, get used to it, Sarah said, trying to lighten the moment. I'm working on mittens next, Sam laughed, the sound warming the room more than the fire. I'll wear them proudly. Later, as they sat by the fire watching the candles flicker on their little tree, Sam spoke quietly. I should leave after the worst of winter passes, for your safety. Sarah stared at the flames, not ready to contemplate his departure. That's still months away. Yes, he agreed, but eventually is not tonight, Sarah said firmly. Tonight, we have Christmas. Sam's hand found hers, tentative at first, then more certain when she didn't pull away. Yes, he said softly. Tonight, we have Christmas. January brought bitter cold and a week of blizzards that kept them housebound. They passed the time with card games, reading aloud from Sarah's small collection of books, and conversations that gradually ventured into deeper waters. Sam told stories from his days as a deputy, and Sarah shared memories of growing up on the ranch. The forced proximity changed something between them. Small touches became common, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing a dish, sitting close enough on the sofa that their knees occasionally touched. Neither acknowledged this shift aloud. But Sarah found herself thinking of Sam in ways that made her cheeks warm. He was no longer just the stranger in her barn. He was the man who knew how she took her coffee, who had memorized which floorboard creaked so he wouldn't wake her when he rose before dawn, who hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening. In February, when the roads finally cleared enough for travel, Sarah made her monthly trip into town for supplies. Sam stayed behind, still too recognizable to risk the public appearance. At the general store, Sarah gathered the items on her list, adding a few luxuries: peppermint sticks, a new razor for Sam, coffee beans instead of their usual chicory blend. As she waited for Mr. Peterson to total her purchases, she overheard two men talking at the feed counter. Bounty hunters moved on last month. Heard they tracked that deputy killer to Wyoming territory. Good riddance. Last thing we need is that sort hanging around. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her heart raced. If the bounty hunters had given up searching locally. You're mighty cheerful today, Miss Novak, Mr. Peterson observed as he wrapped her purchases. Ranch faring well this winter? Well enough, Sarah replied carefully. My cousin's help has been invaluable. Cousin, is it? The storekeeper's tone was skeptical. Folks were wondering about that arrangement. Man staying alone with an unmarried woman. Sarah stiffened. As I said, he's family, and a perfect gentleman. Of course, of course. Peterson nodded, though his expression remained doubtful. Just concerned for your reputation, Miss Novak. Your father was well respected. Thank you for your concern, Sarah said coolly, gathering her packages. Good day, Mr. Peterson. On the ride home, Sarah's thoughts tumbled. Town gossip was the least of her worries, but it highlighted the precarious nature of their situation. Sam couldn't remain her cousin indefinitely without raising more suspicion. Eventually, he would either have to leave or... Sarah pushed the alternative from her mind. A wanted man had no future to offer anyone, especially not a woman with a ranch to manage. When she returned, Sam was in the barn, repairing a saddle. His face lit up at the sight of her, setting aside his work to help unload the wagon. Everything all right in town? He asked, noticing her distracted air. Fine, Sarah said. Then, because they'd established a policy of honesty between them. The bounty hunters have apparently moved on to Wyoming, and the town is gossiping about my cousin staying here. Sam's expression sobered. That was inevitable, I suppose. Yes, small towns run on gossip. They worked in silence for a moment, unloading supplies. I heard something else, Sarah added, attempting casualness. The federal marshal for this territory is investigating corruption in the courts. There's talk of reviewing cases where Judge Parker's rulings were questionable. Sam paused, a sack of flour in his arms. Where did you hear this? Mr. Peterson mentioned it to another customer, something about testimony from a prosecutor who had a change of conscience. Hope flickered briefly in Sam's eyes before he tamped it down. Even if it's true, it could take years, and there's no guarantee my case would be among those reviewed. But it's something, Sarah insisted. A possibility. Sam set the flour down on the kitchen table. A very slim one. Still better odds than you had a month ago. He studied her face. Why does it matter so much to you, Sarah? Whether I'm cleared or not, I'd still have to leave come spring. The question hung between them, demanding an answer Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to give. But the months of shared meals, shared work, shared silences had built something she couldn't easily dismiss. Because I care what happens to you, she said finally. Because you're not just passing through anymore. Sam's expression softened. He stepped closer, close enough that Sarah could feel the warmth radiating from him. And what am I, then? Sarah met his gaze steadily. You're someone who matters to me. Sam's hand came up to touch her cheek, calloused fingers gentle against her skin. You matter to me too, Sarah, more than I can say. The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then Sam stepped back, his hand falling away. Which is why I should start planning to move on, he said quietly. Before I forget that I have no right to, he stopped, shaking his head. Before I forget what's best for you. Sarah wanted to argue, to tell him that she could decide what was best for herself. But the reality of their situation remained unchanged. Sam was still wanted. The ranch was still her responsibility. And the future was still uncertain. Instead, she nodded and turned to put away the supplies, pushing down the ache in her chest. March brought the first signs of spring patches of grass appearing beneath melting snow, longer daylight hours, birds returning to nest in the eaves of the barn. With the changing season came an unspoken tension. Sam began making subtle preparations for departure, mending his clothes, setting aside small supplies. Sarah pretended not to notice, throwing herself into spring planting and preparations for calving season. They still shared meals, still sat by the fire in the evenings, but a new carefulness characterized their interactions. They were like dancers who had learned the steps of a complicated dance, only to discover the music was about to end. One evening, as Sarah kneaded bread dough in the kitchen, Sam entered with an armful of firewood. Storm's coming, he said, setting the wood in the box by the stove. Barometers falling fast. The new calves will need checking through the night, Sarah replied, focusing on her task. I'll take first watch, Sam offered. He paused, watching her work the dough with more force than necessary. Sarah? I've been thinking about what you said, about the federal investigation. Sarah looked up, flour dusting her hands and forearms. Yes? There's a lawyer in Helena I once helped. He might be willing to inquire about my case discreetly. Hope bloomed in Sarah's chest. You'd consider staying in Montana, fighting the charges? If there's a chance, Sam hesitated. It would mean remaining in hiding longer, and there would still be risk. But less risk than running forever, Sarah pointed out, and you'd have somewhere safe to stay while you waited. Sam's expression turned serious. I can't keep living on your charity indefinitely, Sarah. It's not charity. You've more than earned your keep these past months. That's not what people will say. Sarah's hand stilled in the dough. I don't care what people say. You should, Sam insisted. Your reputation, your standing in the community, is already compromised according to town gossip, Sarah interrupted, and still less important to me than... She trailed off, unsure how to finish. Then what? Sam prompted, his voice low. Sarah met his gaze. Then you. The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Sam crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. Sarah, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. I have nothing to offer you, no name I can safely use, no future that isn't shadowed by the past. I'm not asking for offerings, Sarah replied. I'm asking you to stay, to fight, to see if there might be... She gestured between them, words failing. Sam's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. If I kiss you now, he said quietly, I'm afraid I won't have the strength to do what's right. Sarah lifted her chin. What if what's right isn't what you think? For a moment, Sam remained frozen in indecision. Then, with a sound that was half groan, half surrender, he closed the distance between them. His lips met hers tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Sarah responded. His hands came up to frame her face, careful not to touch her with his work-roughened palms. Sarah, heedless of the flour coating her fingers, gripped the front of his shirt, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for months," he confessed. "What took you so long?" Sarah asked, smiling. "Fear." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Fear that I'd fall in love with you and never be able to leave." Sarah's heart stuttered at his words. "And have you fallen in love with me?" Sam's eyes, those clear blue eyes that had first held her attention in the dim light of her barn, were warm with certainty. "Yes, Sarah Novak. I have loved you since you stitched me up without asking my name." Sarah raised herself on tiptoes to kiss him again, briefly but tenderly. "Then, write to your lawyer friend. Find out if there's hope for clearing your name, and in the meantime, stay with me." "As what?" Sam asked. "Your cousin? Your ranch hand?" "As the man I love," Sarah said simply. "The rest we'll figure out." The storm Sam had predicted arrived with fury, bringing late-season snow and howling winds that rattled the farmhouse windows. They spent the night checking on the new calves, huddled together in the barn during the worst of the gale, talking about possibilities that had seemed unthinkable just days before. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving pristine white drifts against the buildings. As they stood on the porch watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered landscape gold and pink, Sam slipped his arm around Sarah's waist. "I'll write to Thomas Jenkins today," he said. "The lawyer in Helena." "Good," Sarah replied, leaning into his embrace. "And I'll ride to town next week to mail it." Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "This won't be easy, Sarah. It could take months, even years, and it might come to nothing. Or it might give us everything," she countered. He smiled down at her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "When did you become such an optimist?" "The night a bleeding stranger didn't shoot me in my own barn," Sarah replied, only half joking. "I took a chance then. I'm willing to take another now." In April, a letter arrived from Helena. Sarah's hands shook as she handed it to Sam, watching anxiously as he broke the seal and unfolded the single page. "Jenkins will take the case," Sam said, scanning the neat script. "He says there's preliminary evidence suggesting judicial misconduct in several of Parker's cases. He wants me to write down everything I remember about that day in Fort Smith." "That's good news, isn't it?" Sarah asked. "It's a start," Sam agreed cautiously. "But Jenkins also warns that I should stay hidden. If I'm arrested before he can gather enough evidence, it could be too late." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Then we keep you hidden. We've managed this long." Over the following weeks, Sam wrote pages of testimony, documenting every detail of the shootout that had changed his life. He described the smugglers, the young judge's son who had been running with them, the exchange of gunfire that had left 3 men dead. Meanwhile, spring work demanded attention. They repaired winter damage, prepared fields for planting, and watched over the new calves. Working side by side, their relationship deepened. Touches that had once been tentative became natural. Conversations ranged from practical ranch matters to dreams neither had dared voice before. In May, when Sarah rode into town with Sam's completed statement to mail, she was greeted with curious looks and whispers. "Miss Novak," Sheriff Taylor called, approaching her as she left the post office. "Got a minute?" Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, Sheriff. What can I do for you?" The lawman studied her face. "Been hearing talk about that cousin of yours." "Is that so?" Sarah replied coolly. "Thing is, I knew your pa pretty well. Don't recall him ever mentioning family on his wife's side." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Pa wasn't one for discussing family matters." "Uh-huh." The sheriff didn't look convinced. "Funny thing, had a telegram from Fort Smith last week. They're looking for a former deputy named Sam Zander. Tall fellow, blue eyes, good with his hands." Sarah's mouth went dry. But she maintained her composure. "Sounds like a common enough description." "Maybe." Taylor scratched his chin. "Thing is, they're not looking to arrest him anymore. Seems there's been some new evidence come to light. They want him to testify." Hope and fear warred in Sarah's chest. "Is that so?" "Yep. Judge Parker's son wasn't as innocent as his daddy claimed. Marshal's office is reviewing the case." The sheriff leaned closer. "If you happen to know where this Zander fellow might be found, you might mention it's safe for him to come forward. Might even be a reward for him." Sarah swallowed hard. I'll keep that in mind, Sheriff. You do that. Taylor touched the brim of his hat. Give my regards to your cousin. Sarah completed her errands with mechanical efficiency, her mind racing. Could it be true? Was it possible that Sam might be cleared so quickly? She urged her horse to a faster pace on the return journey, eager to share the news. As the ranch came into view, Sarah spotted Sam repairing the paddock fence, his shirt sleeves rolled up, hat shading his face from the spring sun. He looked up at the sound of approaching hoofbeats, his expression shifting from concentration to concern at her hasty arrival. "What's wrong?" he asked as Sarah dismounted. "Sheriff Taylor stopped me in town," she blurted. "He knows who you are." Sam tensed, reaching instinctively for a weapon he no longer carried. "Did he follow you?" "No, listen, he said they're not looking to arrest you anymore. There's new evidence in your case. They want you to testify." Disbelief washed over Sam's features. "That can't be right. It's a trap." "I don't think so," Sarah insisted. "He mentioned specific details about Judge Parker's son, about evidence coming to light. It matches what your lawyer wrote." Sam ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process this unexpected turn. "Even if it's true, Sarah, do you know what this means?" "It means you could be free," she said, taking his hands in hers. "Truly free." The weight of possibility settled between them. After a moment, Sam nodded decisively. "I need to go to town, talk to Taylor myself." "I'm coming with you," Sarah said immediately. Sam looked as though he might argue, then nodded. "We'll go together." They rode side by side into town the following morning, tension evident in the set of Sam's shoulders. Sarah kept close, her presence a silent declaration of support as they approached the sheriff's office. Taylor looked up from his desk, unsurprised. "Figured you'd be coming in. You must be Zander." "I am," Sam confirmed, standing tall. "I understand you've had communication from Fort Smith." The sheriff nodded, retrieving a telegram from his desk drawer. "Read it yourself." The message was brief but clear. Samuel Zander, sought as witness in judicial misconduct investigation. Not considered fugitive. Contact U.S. Marshal Fleming for details. Sam read it twice, disbelief warring with hope. "Could be forged," he said cautiously. "Could be," Taylor agreed. "But I took the liberty of confirming it through channels I trust." He pulled another paper from his drawer. "This came this morning. Thought you might show up." This telegram was more detailed, confirming that 3 cases involving Judge Parker were being reviewed following testimony from a former prosecutor who admitted to suppressing evidence. Sam Zander was named specifically as a key witness whose testimony was now being sought. "It's real," Sarah breathed, reading over Sam's shoulder. "Appears so," Taylor said. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sam looked at Sarah, 1,000 unspoken questions in his gaze. She nodded slightly, squeezing his hand. "I'll testify," Sam told the sheriff, "whatever they need." Taylor smiled, the first genuine expression he'd shown. "Figured you might. I've arranged passage for you on tomorrow's stage to Helena. Marshal Fleming will meet you there." "Tomorrow?" Sarah's grip tightened on Sam's hand. "Sooner the better," Taylor said. "Unless you'd prefer to wait." Sam shook his head. "No, tomorrow is fine." They made arrangements to meet at the stage depot the following morning, then walked back to their horses in stunned silence. "I can't believe it's happening so quickly," Sarah said as they rode home. "Neither can I," Sam admitted. "Part of me still thinks it might be an elaborate trap." "If it were a trap, why involve the local sheriff? Why not simply send bounty hunters again?" Sam had no answer for that. "If it's real, if I'm cleared, then you'll be free," Sarah finished for him. "Yes." Sam's expression was a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Free to make choices I never thought I'd have again." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the question of the future hung between them. "How long will you be gone?" Sarah asked finally. "I don't know," Sam admitted. "Days, maybe weeks if there's a formal hearing." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her anxiety. "The ranch will manage without you for a while." "Sarah?" Sam took her hand, waiting until she met his gaze. "I'm coming back." "You don't have to," she said quickly. "If you're cleared, you could return to your land in Arkansas, or—" "I'm coming back," he repeated firmly. If you'll have me. Sarah's breath caught. In what capacity? Sam smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. In whatever capacity you'll accept me. Ranch hand neighbor? He hesitated. Husband. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with promise. Is that a proposal, Samuel Zander? Sarah asked, her voice unsteady. A conditional one, he clarified. Conditional on my name being cleared, on me having a future I can offer you without shame or danger. Sarah turned to face him fully. And if I don't want to wait for conditions, if I want to accept now, regardless of outcomes, Sam cupped her cheek tenderly. Then I'd say you're the most stubborn, most wonderful woman I've ever known. And I'd still insist on doing right by you. You already have, Sarah insisted. You've been doing right by me since the day you fixed my kitchen door. Sam laughed softly, leaning in to press his forehead against hers. Give me time to clear my name, then I'll ask you properly, with a ring and everything a woman like you deserves. I'm holding you to that promise, Sarah whispered. The stage to Helena departed at 8 the next morning. Sam stood by the depot, a small bag containing his few possessions at his feet, looking more uncertain than Sarah had ever seen him. Marshal Fleming is expecting me, he said, as if reassuring himself. Jenkins will meet me at his office. You have the letters, Sarah reminded him, and your written testimony. Sam nodded, his eyes never leaving her face, as if memorizing her features. I'll write as soon as I can. The stage driver called for passengers to board. Sam hesitated, then pulled Sarah into his arms, heedless of the curious onlookers. I love you, he said against her hair. Remember that, no matter what happens. I love you too, Sarah replied, holding him tightly. Come back to me. I will, Sam promised, one way or another. Then he was boarding the stage, tipping his hat to her through the window as the horses lurched forward. Sarah stood in the street long after the coach had disappeared from view, dust settling on the road ahead. The days that followed were the longest of Sarah's life. She threw herself into ranch work, exhausting herself with chores that had previously been shared. At night, she sat on the porch where they had spent so many evenings together, watching the stars and wondering where Sam was, what he was doing. 2 weeks after his departure, a letter arrived. Sarah's hands trembled as she broke the seal. My dearest Sarah, I've arrived safely in Helena and met with both Marshal Fleming and Jenkins. The investigation is indeed genuine. 3 other deputies have come forward with similar stories of evidence tampering in cases where Judge Parker had personal connections. I've given my testimony under oath. Fleming believes my account, especially now that one of the smugglers from that day has confessed that the judge's son fired first. There will be a formal hearing in Fort Smith next month. I must attend, but Jenkins is confident the outcome will be favorable. The charges against me have been suspended pending the investigation's conclusion. I think of you constantly. The city feels foreign after months on your quiet ranch. I miss the sound of the wind in the cottonwoods, the smell of your bread baking, the way the light catches in your hair at sunset. Most of all, I miss you, your strength, your kindness, your stubborn insistence on doing what's right, regardless of convention. I will return as soon as I'm able. Keep a light burning. All my love. Sarah read the letter repeatedly until she had memorized every word. She wrote back immediately, describing the ranch, the spring calves, the wildflowers blooming in the meadow. She told him she missed him, loved him, was waiting for him. More letters followed over the weeks, each one bringing news of progress. The hearing was scheduled. Witnesses were gathering. The case against Judge Parker was building. In June, a telegram arrived. Hearing completed. Stop charges, dismissed. Stop returning. Next week, stop all my love. Sarah spent the days before his expected return in a flurry of activity, cleaning the house, baking his favorite bread, preparing the room that had been his, as if he might still need it, though she hoped he wouldn't. When the day came, Sarah dressed in her best blue dress, the one she usually saved for Sunday services, and pinned her hair up the way Sam once said he liked. She waited on the porch, watching the road, startling at every distant sound. The sun was beginning its descent when she finally spotted a rider approaching. Sarah stood, shading her eyes, her heart hammering as she recognized Sam's silhouette. He rode slowly, as if savoring the approach, his face breaking into a smile as he drew near. Sam dismounted in one fluid motion, securing his horse before turning to face her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the yard. Then Sarah was moving, running down the steps and across the distance between them. Sam caught her in his arms, lifting her off her feet, in an embrace that spoke of months of longing. "You're back," Sarah whispered when he finally set her down. "I told you I would be." Sam's voice was rough with emotion. His hand came up to touch her cheek, reverent. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." Sarah laughed, tears threatening. "You've been gone less than 2 months." "Felt like years," Sam said, his gaze intense. "I never want to be parted from you again, Sarah Novak." Before she could respond, Sam reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I promise to do this properly," he said, dropping to one knee before her, "with a ring and everything you deserve." Sarah's breath caught as Sam opened the box to reveal a delicate gold band with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "Sarah Elizabeth Novak, I love you more than I ever thought possible. You took in a stranger without asking his name. You defended me when you had every reason to fear me. You believed in me when I'd lost faith in myself." Sam's voice trembled slightly. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, then louder. "Yes, Samuel Zander. Yes." Sam's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her close against him. "I have news," he said when they finally broke apart. "The marshal's office has offered me a position. Not as a deputy, but as a liaison with the territorial courts. I'd be based in Helena." Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Helena? That's a long way from the ranch." "It is," Sam agreed, "which is why I turned it down. But if it would clear your name completely—" "My name is cleared," Sam interrupted gently. "The position was an opportunity, not a requirement." He took her hands in his. "I told them I had other plans, a ranch that needs tending, a woman who needs marrying, a life that's waiting for me right here." Relief and joy washed over Sarah. "You're staying, truly staying?" "For as long as you'll have me," Sam confirmed, "which I hope is forever." 6 weeks later, on a perfect summer afternoon, Sarah and Sam exchanged vows in the same church where her parents had been married. The entire town turned out for the occasion, curiosity about Sam's history and their unusual courtship drawing even those who rarely attended services. Sheriff Taylor stood as Sam's best man, a friendship having formed during the investigation. Mrs. Peterson, the storekeeper's wife, helped Sarah with her simple white dress and veil of Belgian lace. "Never seen a bride so radiant," she commented as she pinned the veil in place, "nor a groom so besotted." Sarah blushed, fingering the delicate chain around her neck where her father's pocket watch now hung, nestled in the hollow of her throat. "I wish Pa could have been here." "He'd have approved," Mrs. Peterson said confidently. "Any man who looks at a woman the way your Sam looks at you would get a father's blessing." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sam kissed Sarah with a tenderness that brought tears to more than one observer's eyes. At the reception held in the town hall, Sheriff Taylor raised his glass in a toast. "To second chances," he said, nodding to the couple, "and to the courage it takes to offer them." Later, as they danced beneath paper lanterns strung from the rafters, Sam held Sarah close, their movements more swaying than proper dancing. "Happy, Mrs. Zander," he murmured against her ear. Sarah smiled up at him, joy radiating from every feature. "Completely. And you?" "More than I ever dreamed possible." Sam's expression turned thoughtful. "You know, when I first took shelter in your barn that night, I was sure my life was over. I was just trying to stay alive long enough to reach Canada." "And now," Sarah prompted, "now I know my life was just beginning." Sam brushed a kiss against her temple. "That night wasn't an ending. It was our beginning." As twilight deepened into night, they slipped away from the celebration, riding together toward the ranch, their ranch now, in name as well as deed. The lights of the farmhouse welcomed them home, just as Sarah had promised in her letters. Inside, Sam lifted Sarah into his arms to carry her across the threshold, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture. "Welcome home, Samuel Zander," Sarah said as he set her down in the entryway. Home, Sam repeated, looking around at the simple rooms that had sheltered him, healed him, brought them together. I liked the sound of that. Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of what was now their shared bedroom, Sam traced lazy patterns on Sarah's bare shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her head pillowed on his chest. "The future," Sam replied. "Our future." "And what does it look like?" Sam smiled in the darkness. "Children, eventually, a bigger herd, maybe expanding the house a bit." "That sounds perfect," Sarah murmured sleepily. "It will be," Sam promised, "because we'll build it together." As Sarah drifted toward sleep, safe in her husband's arms, she thought about the night she'd found a bleeding stranger in her barn, how easily she might have turned him away or betrayed him, how different their lives would have been. Instead, she'd brought him bread without asking his name, had given shelter to a man in need. That simple act of kindness had changed everything, had brought her love, partnership, and a future brighter than she dared imagine after her father's death. Some might call it fate or providence. Sarah preferred to think of it as grace, the same grace her father had taught her to extend to every soul in need. Grace that had returned to her 100-fold, in the form of the man now sleeping beside her, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. Grace that had brought them home to each other, and would carry them forward into all the days to come.